Okay, so this video is going to be talking about how to establish sovereignty over your space. So we all have an independent level of sovereignty, right? We're entitled to what is ours. We're entitled to ourselves. And this starts with space, starts with self. So everything within your body is under your control. That's how you can manipulate your hand or your head. This is all your own sovereign space, and so it's under your direct control. Now, when you're establishing sovereignty over this space, it's your deeper self coming forward and basically establishing that, like, this is my space. Everything that does not fit in my space, it's time for you to get out. And so this can be done by bringing that inner self forward, that deeper self forward, and saying, like, this is not an acceptable behavior or trait or characteristic, and pushing for that transmutation. Now, to claim sovereignty over self, you want to say independent sovereignty. So I claim independent sovereignty. If there's no claims, then it's open to everything. If there's no claims, it's open to everything. It can only be claimed on the realm by a physical space, but if there's no claims, then it's open to everything. And everything is energetic everything. So if you don't have claimed over self or space, then any energetic everything can come into this space and influence this space however they feel, because there's nobody to say otherwise. This comes from sovereign. So you claim this inner independent sovereignty. I claim independent sovereignty 3 times. I claim independent sovereignty. I claim independent sovereignty. And this comes from a space of power in yourself. And the more power in yourself you have, the more sovereign you can become. Because there's going to be layers of doubt in self that permeate, and there's going to be layers of hesitation that permeate, and there's going to be layers of reserved self. And this all holds back your power and reserve, so it creates like layers. So like every reservation creates like layers, and you only have sovereign over to like these actions. You're not sovereign over your breathing. Do you control your breathing every day? So as you claim more sovereign over space, then you can become a mindful breather and have consciousness over every breath of the whole existence. There's everything in the existence can be under this control, but the subconscious functions are tools to assist us with having those in beneficial ways. You program self to breathe appropriate versus having to be mindful of every breath. This is a programming function. Through that sovereignty is first you establish the breathing pattern, and then you say, okay, this is how I want the vessel to breathe appropriately. And then you give the subconscious the reins so that way it can do that. And it goes beyond those functions. Those are physical functions. It goes into energetic functions. When there is other energies in the space, you now have that established control over those energies. So you can say, all energies in my space who have a negative influence need to leave immediately. Because you've established sovereignty, that law becomes sovereign. You're the master of your space. That law permeates your space. So that has to happen. And then it becomes like an evacuation order, and things happen. You might get sick. It just depends on the level of belief you have and power you have. If you don't have a lot of belief and power, only the weaker ones are going to escape. The bigger, deeper ones are going to just hide away until that dust settles and you get back into a weakened state, and then they can come back up. And you're like, well, why are they still existing? It's because that your powered self met them. They had more control or influence over the space, power in themselves or whatever. And it's part of our regaining control over our spaces to see these negative characteristics or habits or routines, addictions and stuff, and see how they manifest, and our sovereignty over them, like quitting smoking cigarettes, quitting drinking. These are addictions and controls that have control over us, and we're not able to have sovereignty if we are controlled by alcohol or smoking. Those are just examples, but on an energetic level, these permeate through thoughts, emotions, anything of a negative intention that is all under your control in your environment of self and expression, manifestation. of self. It's just the level of control gets lessened as we get weakened through life. So we lose power in ourselves, and then we're fractured because we've given up so much of ourselves. In order to reclaim those selves that we've given up, we have to like come in contact with them and say, hey, I don't like your thought process, I don't like your characteristics of this approach, I don't like the emotions that is attached to this, I disapprove of the action that comes about. These are not in my highest intention or my highest light. You see room for improvement on that, and that's you coming through and saying, fix this. This is incorrect. If you're going to be in my space, you're going to fix this. And it's a subconscious program. It's a self you gave up. You're coming back to saying, fix this. And so that self is fixing itself to align with you. And once you guys harmonize together, you guys reabsorb into each other, and it's just an acceptance of energy from there. Otherwise, it's fractured versions of self that are working independently of whole, and they have their own little subtle thought constructs. It's very simple. It's basically what you told that or had the intent of in the moment and time, and they kind of act about that type of rationality, and it's that type of linear thinking. As you grow through these and release those, then you won't have those negative or withholding thought constructs as you move forward. You'll have the more liberating and the more encouraging and understanding ones that come with that liberation. Now, this works with space itself. Our space is claimed or unclaimed, sovereign or unsovereign. You're the master of your own space. It's your room, your room. It's your house. It's your house. Your car. These things are yours and claimed as our ownership. So you have this sovereignty over them. And if it's not claimed, then your car is literally a vehicle for whatever wants to fill the seats. If they're empty, the car can fill all those seats with other spirits or entities or whatever wants to ride around. If the space is claimed as sovereign and saying nothing is allowed in my space but beings who are going to be good intention and will and helpful growth, then your space is going to be filled up with those types of characters. You'll find aliens and angels and stuff in your back seats, and then they're going to be more positive and reaffirming along the drive, where if it's just whatever, it's just however the mood feels is going to attract that today. If it's kind of a rocky point, you're going to get a little bit of both, positive and negatives. It's not going to be really polarized to one distinction unless there's that polarization in self, and if you're predominantly negative, then you'll predominantly draw that negativity. And so as you claim that sovereignty in space, you can reestablish the rules and constructs of this space. Now that I'm sovereign of this space, I claim sovereignty over this space. So the establishment is like over the car, you touch the vehicle and establish, I claim sovereignty over this space by right of ownership. And that's the why. It's like, why is it yours? Because I own it. I have the title. These are the rules of the land that give me ownership on it. This is my domain, and this is how the rules work on my domain. So now this is mine, and the energy's like, oh, okay, well, that's great. Here you go, it's yours. And then you're like, okay, well, I want to establish rules for this space. I don't want any negative thought constructs or beings of ill intent. I only want positive energies of the highest positive selves in this space. And then this energy is going to be like, all right, that's what's going to happen. And so as you go into that space, you cross that threshold of energy, it's going to filter out those negative and lower constructs and thoughts and allow that positive and higher space to come in. But if you don't have the establishment, it's just going to be polarities, and it's just going to be like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, it's kind of up in the middle, it's a little bit in the middle, up in the air. So it's important to establish this sovereignty over the things that are ours, and then give it instructions and guidance on what it is to be in our realm. If it's in my realm, I only want of the most positive and highest selves. So I can only allow in my personal space, I only allow beings who are able to resonate with my higher selves. And so if I can't resonate with you, then you're not allowed in my space. And so your aspects and your forms are going to transform into this version of you that's able to resonate in my space. And that's a requirement, and it's going to manifest in your actions, and it's going to be subtle and subconscious, and you're not going to be as noticeable of it unless you're very mindful of self. And then you're going to know, like, wow, every time I come over to your house, I feel uplifted or elevated, or I feel more euphoric just by being in this space, because like that's a precursor. If you're going to be in my space, you have to rise to meet the space, and rising up is going to bring that higher and more positive energy that comes with the rise. So it's as creative and specific as you can get, but it needs both constructs, the male and the female energy. You need that creative function from the female energy. However creative you can formulate it, whatever level of creativity you want, the more creative the better, because thought constructs are just as creative and they're looking for exceptions. If you're not specific enough, there's an exception somewhere, then we'll find it. And so when you learn this exception, it's like, well, how are you in my space? Oh, you opened the door and let me in. So you invited me in. And then now it's an invitation, so they were able to sidestep that. And it's just like, oh my gosh, dude, like how specific do I have to babysit you? Okay, permeating my space. Like even if I invite you into my space, you must still rise to meet this criteria, or you can't be in my space. And so then like now when you invite people in, they still have to rise to meet that. And it's as creative as you can be. They're just as creative trying to find ways around. So you need that feminine creativity to be like, oh yeah, that's a good way of how I can go through that or around that or whatever. And then you need that masculine specificity to be very specific about what is and is not allowed in. It needs to be very clear, black and white almost. The more black and white you can get about it, the less gray area filters through, the less of like the uncertain, and you're only going to get that which you desire, that which you want, and that which you allow into that threshold in space. So be picky, be specific, and it's going to manifest appropriately. If there's already people in the space, they're either going to vibrate out of the space, or their energies are going to elevate up to meet that level of standard or expectation, because it's an energetic frequency, and our higher selves are capable of meeting that as long as we can connect to that higher self. And so we have to be able to climb enough of our laddered self to reach that higher self and rise to meet that higher standard. So the people who can't rise to meet those higher selves are, you'll see that they'll like, put this phone down, see, like they'll try to like come up to the best they can, but this is still your lowest standard. And so like this is their highest, it's the best they can do. So you can see like they'll probably be like trying really hard and on their best behavior, and they're just still like just not even cutting it. And then that's kind of like that gray area where they'll try to filter through that. And you got to keep that the standard and not make the expectations. Come back when you're ready. Come back when you're ready. The space is still here. Come back when you're ready. And then they'll keep growing and keep working to elevate themselves to be able to reach that. And then when they reach that plateau, they'll be able to come in the space, and then the space will hold enough of that higher frequency, that higher energy, that by the time they get there, it'll feel like a breath of fresh air, and then it'll help elevate their own energy. Like it'll be easy for them to hold that positivity in your space again, because it's already part of the rule set. Welcome in the door, and like now you're in my door, you're under my umbrella, and you're under my protection, and you're under my energy, and my energy goes a lot farther than this, so like welcome. And so it'll be like a real big breath of fresh air, and it'll be trying on them too. It'll like cost a lot of their energy, fatiguing too, but they'll enjoy. It'll be euphoric at the same time. And then when they go back home, their energy levels will be stressed out from being in that higher space, that they'll go through some kind of withdrawals from their lower selves, because their lower selves are going to be like, what, positize? You're trying to be positive on us, bro? Like, what's that? Like, and so like then they'll come out more negative to try to take away from that. But the average self already went up to meet that positive light. So like there's already negative aspects that got lost along the way that aren't going to ever be able to like come back, because we raised our average up to the next step, even if it was a little bit. And this is a consistent thing. The more we consistently raise our average, raise our higher selves, and work on our lower selves and bringing them up, the more our average functional self is going to be elevated and positive and such. So I hope that was some kind of clear example of what we can do to claim sovereignty over ourselves and work on ourselves, and then our space too. And then there's also like a little bit of magic in there too, is being that specific self. Excuse me, being that specific self and that creative self.